rant during this episode.
If you've got the gear, it's easier.
People are scared to be bad at stuff.
Stop wasting time.
Set yourself a goal.
Failure is the most effective teacher.
This is the Learn, Create, Thrive podcast by visualeducation.com. Episode 4, Why is Creativity Dying?
Welcome to the Learn, Create, Thrive podcast. I'm Carl Taylor, photographer, filmmaker. I'm here again with our marketing executive in the creative world, Emma Harris, head of video production and esteemed video editor and producer. I don't know what you want to call yourself, Benjamin Toon.
Keep it coming.
And our resident creative director, artist and illustrator, Tim Godion, or to his friends, Gim Todion.
Where did that come from?
He came from that. It came from him earlier.
When we were filming some art classes.
Hello.
Quite funny. Anyway, right, let's get down to it. Today's topic of conversation is excuses for not being creative. Now, I am likely to have a bit of a rant during this episode. Now, if you guys aren't quite aware of what I mean by that, I'm just going to clarify it for everyone here and for our audience. What I mean by this is the amount of times we hear people say, oh, well, I can't do that because you've got this camera or you've got that lens, or I can't do that because you've got 4 lights in that photo and I've only got 1. And then I said, well, here's a load of shots I did with 1 light instead. Well, I'm busy. It's just like, there always seems to be an excuse. I mean, I think Mark Whitney from Hasselblad put it really good once. He said, this is the excuse eliminator, isn't
That's
it?
isn't it? Yeah.
What was he referring to?
I can't remember now.
I think it's human nature, isn't it? It's easier to put something off to another day than to actually tackle and
Yes, but why don't they just say that? Why do they do it in such a negative way? You almost find these negative people spew this stuff out, and I am going to have a bit of rant about this, and they look to attack you as a creative for doing something, and often they attack you because of this equipment or that, but really they're attacking themselves for their lack of ability or lack of effort.
It's the kind of glass half full or glass half empty, isn't it?
It is.
Some people are positive and some people are more negative with their outlet,
Yes.
and they possibly lack the kind of confidence to do stuff, or just a bit lethargic and can't be bothered. So laziness is perhaps one of the...
Mixed with jealousy.
Maybe.
Yeah. Well, you do get a lot of people reaching out to you saying, well, you can only create that because you've got a big studio or a big...
Yeah, I mean, that's
kit or team
obviously,
or anything.
We're out there on social media, so we get a lot of comments, and we'll probably get a few more here on this one as well. But we get this sort of kickback from certain people. It's only a small minority. Most of the people that follow us or listen to what we do or enjoy what we do, really great people, love them to bits. But there is a small minority that tend to go, let me translate that. You could only do that because you had this, or you only did that because and it's like, it's a frustrating, because then what I try to do is I try to prove to them, well, actually what you've said is wrong, because here's an example in a smaller studio. Here's an example from 25 years ago when I first started out and you couldn't swing a cat in my studio. Here's an example with 1 speed light, or, and maybe Tim gets the same of, well, here I can do this painting just with 1 color only and using it in different blends of, you get these moaners that moan, and they use various factors as an excuse for them not being able to do it or try it.
It's like my granddad always says, a poor workman blames his tools.
Well, that's partly it, isn't it?
It kind of goes back to that, doesn't it?
It's partly it. And tools is an interesting one, because that is one of the common things. It's like, oh, you can only do that because you've got X and X camera. But that's a nonsense, isn't it, Ben?
Yeah, I guess.
I'm going to come over there and give you a good slap of you.
I guess you can see people's work, and it can be good and stuff, and you can be like, oh, I wish I could do that. But you don't need to then go on like the comment section and start, giving people grief about their work, even though they've done something and created something in the way they wanted to create. And it's like, Yeah.
I mean, one example, remember we did that video where we photographed the Harley Davidson motorbike, and obviously it was all super highly lit with lots of expensive lighting. It was taken on an expensive camera, but just to prove that it isn't just the camera, we took the same shot just using my iPhone, and it went out on, it got picked up by a few blogging sites. But just to show that actually first impression at web size at 700 pixels or something, they didn't look too different. One was on a $30,000 Hasselblad camera and one was just on an iPhone. It proves that it wasn't the camera. Oh, don't get me wrong, Hasselblad cameras are fantastic, and for my work, that resolution's amazing. But visually, at that level, at those pixels, it wasn't the camera.
I guess,
it was the lighting.
If you've got the gear, it's easier. And
Yes.
like, if you're working professionally and you're doing that, then you kind of need the gear. If a massive client walked in and said, "Can you do this?" and then you got like a couple of speed lights on your phone out, then you'd obviously be,
exactly.
they walk out laughing. But it's I guess there's doing a job properly, and there's also actually starting something really.
Yeah, and is it what do some of the people that leave these comments, what do they actually think and believe? Do they think that you should not have that equipment when you're a professional? Is like saying, well, I want to go to my dentist and he's only allowed to use a workman's drill and a toothbrush. He's not allowed to have a fancy chair for me to lean back. He's just got to have like a plastic chair like this. It's ludicrous. You wouldn't expect any other profession to downgrade the quality of their kit to do the job they need to do.
When we do like our live shows, you obviously always shoot with your Hasselblad because the tethering software is better.
Yes.
If we were trying to do a live show and you were going to do it not with your Hasselblad and you were going to use a Canon, and we were using like I know obviously you can get other software, but like if you were using the Canon software that's free, so people didn't have to spend any money, then it's going to be so much clunkier. The audience isn't going to see the photos properly. You're not going to be able to zoom in and stuff like that. Like obviously you can get a great shot with the Canon. I'm not saying that, but for the job that is like, say that for our live shows, people want to see the results quickly and properly,
Yeah.
So you shoot tethered with that.
Yeah, and that's, again, like you say, it's because we're trying to actually enhance the production of what we're doing for people to see and make it easier for you. But we did do a live show with a Sony 35mm camera and tethered into Capture One.
Yeah, we can do it.
We can do it.
It just
makes no problem.
It's just makes the job better and smoother and a final better end.
Yeah. What about in art, Tim? Excuses come out for painters and people not, what excuses might you hear?
Not so much excuses. I think it's more about people putting aside some time. And I do it myself. Like sometimes I don't do any painting for months and months, and you've kind of either got to have a commission or a deadline or something where you get on to do it. But one thing I try and do, and I know a lot of artists do it, is just keeping something like a sketchbook where you might just every now and then, or daily, weekly, monthly, just doing some scribbles and that in it. And that kind of keeps the creativity going, jotting down some ideas, working through some ideas. And then you don't necessarily need to undertake a large painting every day, every week, every month, but just having a kind of regular time for yourself to do some art.
But if you're having a bit of creative block, you don't call up Damien Hirst and start giving him aggro, do you?
No, but I guess you get these kind of keyword board warriors that you in all areas. So I guess some people maybe do.
I think it also goes back to people losing the love of just doing something for the sake of doing it rather than having an end goal. Like these people aren't thinking, I want to create a piece of work and I want to go through the process of learning and figuring out how my kit can work to that or whatever. They're just thinking, I want to get to the end. You can only do it because you've got the kit and I can't do it because I don't have that. Yeah. There's not that sort of love of the process of getting there.
And this is, the process is a really good point because I love Daria Belikova's fashion work. She's not a huge fashion photographer. She's not massively famous. She's done some magazine covers and does some good work, but I like her style of work. And people often say, I can never do that. I haven't got the kit. I haven't got the thing. Daria goes out there with 35mm camera, wide angle lenses, which is her style in a lot of her fashion photography. She finds models that are people, that are friends. She gets clothes, gets collaborators, gets them to work, puts out messages on social media saying, would you work with me? I can't pay you, boom, boom, boom. She finds great locations, graveyards, all sorts of back streets and alleyways. She uses mostly natural light. And she turns out these incredible images that cost nothing but look $1 million.
If you want to, you will make it happen.
Exactly. And that's what bugs me about the commenters with their excuses for not being creative. It's like, oh, I haven't got the locations in my area. Well, I'm sorry. I mean, you could live in a desert, you could live in a forest, you could live in an inner city and find a supermarket car park. You know what I mean? There are ways of being creative with whatever you've got. I do appreciate that some people have got very little money or no little money at all to be able to buy the kit. But then again, nearly every hobby requires some investment, no matter what it is.
But I think it's also about the process being enjoyable. So I'm going to bring this back to knitting because it's what I do with most of my spare time. But like, I'm making a jumper at the moment and I could have done it with £1 needles that I got from the charity shop, which are a bit rubbish and falling not the best thing. I could still do it. It would be the exact same outcome, but it would have been not as enjoyable an experience. Instead, I've invested in something a bit more, whatever. It's easier on the hands. I can probably get it done quicker and it's a more enjoyable experience. And it's the same sort of thing, isn't it? You can do it without it.
You can,
but people feel that they have to have the best thing in order to get the best result.
Yeah.
And you don't.
If it's a hobby, I guess you kind of enjoy getting the new, looking at the new needles for this example or whatever.
Sorry, that's the most ridiculous example, but
and like tinkering with it and like getting some different grips and stuff. Because it's like that's what you're into. But I guess it's just you have to just get started.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. I mean, and this is going back to the kit and the equipment. This is often the excuses that we hear. Yet, I do appreciate that photography equipment is expensive, okay? But so is scuba diving equipment. So is if you want to do motorbike racing. Everything's got a price for a certain genre of hobby or activity, and that has to be expected. And if you are going to decide that's what you're going to do, then you have to realize that, yes, it's going to cost me X amount for at least that basic model camera and lens. But I still feel that you could give me that basic camera model and lens, and it's the knowledge that drives the creativity and the results, not the kit per se.
I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's investing in the tools, but you don't need the most expensive tools to do the job.
No.
You do if you're shooting for a big, huge client that wants to get the prints blown up to a billboard. They expect it to be at 100 megapixels or whatever, because that's what they're paying you for.
Yeah.
But you as a creative that just wants to go and get snap, you could go out with a pinhole camera and get an amazingly creative image.
Yeah, true.
There's limitations to the kit and what it can do, but if you think creatively and using light, you could build that pinhole camera yourself with a sweet tin, couldn't you? And a bit of photographic paper.
It's like if you put it to like sport, for example, which I know it's very different, but if you went in a race with Usain Bolt, even if he wasn't in the best shoes, he's going to win.
You sure?
Maybe, but
I wouldn't even get off the line.
But when he does a race, aka a professional job, he wears the best things he can because he wants to be as good as he possibly can. But it's not detrimental to whether or not he could do it. If I gave you a Polaroid camera, you'd probably get a better shot than most people who don't do photography because you've got that skill within you.
Maybe, but I would be focusing more on light and lighting.
Exactly.
So it's the knowledge, isn't
it's
it?
The knowledge
it's not
rather than the kit.
The excuse for a lot of people is they haven't got the tools. And I think a lot of that comes from the people that sell the lighting, the cameras. They make you believe that you need this new camera because it's got this many more megapixels, it's got this many more focal points, etc., etc. So they make you believe that by owning this camera, suddenly you're going to get amazing photographs. But in reality, it's the knowledge of how to use that, because you don't really want to be using the camera in auto mode anyway, because that's going to take all the creativity out of it. So you want to be learning to control that camera, that tool. So picking up a cheap secondhand camera off eBay, a very low entry level, is probably going to teach you a lot more than starting out with
and that is evident if we look back in time. When I first started, I was shooting Canon F1 film cameras, Canon T90s or Nikon FM2s. If you look back in time at some of the most iconic images ever shot, that are in, Magnum Images, National Geographic. These were taken on film cameras in manual mode, with manual focus lenses that don't even come anywhere near today's quality. But the images have stood the test of time because the photographer's knowledge, his appreciation of that particular culture they were photographed, and the research they put into it, understanding light composition. The photograph is incredible, absolutely incredible. And it has very little to do with the gear, because if I gave that kit to someone today and said, use that, they'd be like, oh, and yet that same kit made these other iconic images. How is it in art and painting? Is there a sort of snobbery over the brushes, the paints, the canvases?
Not really that I'm aware of. And I always kind of say to people, well, you can make a mark with anything. And that's something that tutors of mine have said to me in the past. Like, quite often I use the handle of the paintbrush to scratch back into the canvas, as well as the brush end. So really, and you can use your hands, your fingers, or
I take it though you can get various price paintbrushes.
There is various price paintbrushes, but I think it's more, and some of them can be quite expensive, and it is good to invest in good tools as you get better and when you decide, and this is the area of painting that I want to do. So say for watercolors, a large decent brush might set you back 20, 30 quid, but that will last you for years and years. So it's worth doing, and it's worth looking after those tools. But you can do a great watercolor painting with a really cheap naff brush.
I can imagine that every professional that you see now didn't have that amazing gear from the get-go.
Exactly.
It's just they're out there, so you're seeing them because they're doing it, and they're obviously using better gear because they can afford it, and that's what their job is.
And
sorry, I was just going to say, it's just like bands. Your band starts recording their first albums on less expensive equipment. They're not going to Abbey Road and recording their first album or anything.
When they started learning guitar, I guarantee they didn't buy like a 20 grand
exactly.
guitar. But then everyone's jealous of their guitars.
Exactly.
It's the same as like the cameras.
And this is part of the problem, is that you get this the criticism or critics or whatever, and then they don't appreciate the 30-year backstory that you went through to get where you are today, to do what you do today. And, why would you choose to use lesser equipment on purpose if you've got 30 years career building up to where you are now? I mean, the other interesting one in terms of also, I think equipment now has become so much less expensive to the higher quality, especially in filmmaking, Ben, leveling the playing field. What can we do with equipment today?
I guess, if you look at like the cameras, like it would only be production houses that would be able to afford a camera that would then make these movies. Whereas like
back in the day.
Whereas now you've got like, I don't know, The Creator, which is that massive sci-fi movie that came out a few years ago. That was filmed with like was it FX3?
Which is the A7S3 Sony.
It's the A7S3 body, without the viewfinder basically.
But it's the same sensor.
And then I think they were using like aperture lights and stuff as well. So it's like, it just shows that, and the quality that you get out of like what a $3 grand video camera now though is just like, it's miles better.
How much is that camera, that FX3 or
it's about $3 grand.
So it's a $3,000 camera body. He had it on a rig, which would have cost maybe another $1,000. They used mostly natural light wherever they could, and then there was CGI on top. But this is a multi-million-dollar sci-fi movie, a very good one as well, I thought. The Creator is called. It was filmed on the most base level kit you can imagine. And yet it was a successful film. Yes, I know there's a lot of CGI, but what if you go to something like the Blair Witch Project, which was probably filmed on some old piece of...
And how iconic is that movie?
Like a handicap. And also I think now when you watch, like, I'm not a filmmaker myself, but I watch the odd movie and TV series and that, and sometimes the look and the feel of the film is very important, and that too higher end camera almost takes away that look and feel, doesn't it? So shooting it on a more specific style of camera has probably got some benefits.
Well, they do that, don't they, Ben? They go back to 70mm film and stuff for a lot of movies. I mean, that's still expensive kit, but for a particular look or feeling,
obviously that is expensive. But like, you could then just apply similar effects and stuff if you were like, obviously that's not what the big production companies are going to want to do. They're going to want to do it properly. But I mean, like, if you really wanted to get that look, you could film it on like I said, a $3 grand camera, maybe even less. Like, obviously all DSLRs do video, and they're like a lot cheaper. And then you could just kind of get workarounds like effects, that you can layer on top, or overlays, and get that look without having to, spend all this money on film and these mega cameras.
Yeah. Now, other excuses. So we've spoken about equipment there, specifically photography cameras or filmmaking equipment. We covered a little bit on location with like Daria's work, and obviously all of that equipment stuff relates to costs. But another one we hear is often to do with computers. But these days, nearly any computer can do Premiere video editing and photo editing, no problem at all. Photoshop. Now, yes, there are costs, aren't there, in the software. So I suppose you could use that as an excuse, but
I don't know.
I think there's open source software, isn't there, out there that will do most things nowadays. I mean,
how much does Photoshop cost a month? Let's say you just want Photoshop and what is it, Lightroom? Is it like $10 a month?
£9 a month or something? It's not much at all.
For the whole creative suite, it's like 56.
And you don't have to have it forever. You can just say, well, I'm going to use it for 3 months to edit these images.
And there is other open source, I don't know the names off the top of my head, but there is other open source programs out there. Most cameras come with their own basic, like raw software, which you can do some editing.
I think with video, there is like obviously drives. You need like more expensive drives because like the cameras are obviously. If you're filming in 4K, then you're going to need more space, and then obviously the drive has got to be fast, otherwise you won't be able to edit off them.
But if you think, Tim and I know this from back in the day with the big video editing suites. You were talking hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars in those video editing suites like Avid and all that. Today you can do it all in Premiere. And
you could obviously still do it. And if like there are workarounds, you could like just put all your footage on your drive that the project you're working on, on your direct drive and do it like that. So that there obviously are ways.
But the playing field is very much more leveled in the last decade in terms of software and equipment for anyone to be as creative as anyone, which is why I find it frustrating when you hear people make these excuses, and I honestly believe they are just excuses for their lack of willingness to start. And I've got that down here as a point: latency and inertia. It's almost like you're a rock, a heavy rock, and it's that getting it moving.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? I think a lot of people get stuck in a rut, and you think, how can I can't do this, or I'm not good enough, or where do I start, kind of thing. And it's like with art, that's what I always say, well, just start scribbling down some ideas, because when I do a large painting, that painting rarely starts off just as a large painting.
Right.
There'll be a moment that a lot of the work I do is landscapes, and it's light that really excites me, and how it reflects or interacts with the environment that I'm in at the time. And that moment of light might be a storm cloud passing, the sunset, something like that. But that moment, that sort of spark of inspiration there is the starting point. So that might be then a snap on my iPhone, or a sketch, a little watercolor and a sketch pad if I've got it with me, or even just a pencil sketch, or a scribble with a biro on the back of a envelope be enough. But that's the kind of starting point. So as you get these ideas, and I think if you're a creative person, you notice these things that you like, just making a note of them, keeping it in a sketchbook, and then when it comes to getting around to painting, doing something, or a photo shoot, even then you want to sketch down some ideas, some concepts, or even if it's not sketching, it's maybe a mind map of some ideas and keywords or phrases of something that you'd like to tackle as a kind of concept. But then you've got a starting point there so the process of actually getting to the start line is easier, because you've already got a starting point, and then you need to then work out, well, this is my idea, what do I need to do now to accomplish it, to get the finished piece? Like with me, I just need a canvas and a bit of time and some paints to put it on. But if you're going to shoot a movie or a photo shoot, what is my shoot going to be of? Almost then make a list of what you need for it. And like you used Daria Belikova as an example there, where she needs a model, location, and then probably some assistants doing the shoot to hold some reflectors of that. So then you think, well, I need a model, I need a location, and I need 2 assistants. So let's put a shout out to my friends in my WhatsApp group or something. Anyone can help me this weekend. Do you know what I mean? And then that initial problem is suddenly halved, because then you've got 2 people to help assist. Then you just need to find a model. So again,
but it's having that impetus to do it.
It's that emphasis, and then just take it in small steps. Do you know what I mean? Don't have a big, massive.
So for a lot of people, the excuses is just really down to bone idle laziness.
And
I mean, it's true. I'm sorry. It is.
Yeah.
It's people's sort of are just reluctant to actually have the energy.
Well, they're
to
just
get
stuck
going.
on social media
also-
scrolling.
Yeah.
No, but the thing
I was
is,
gonna
but I
say.
think social media has a big impact because I
Yeah.
think we see all these perfect things. We see everyone being good at stuff, and I think people are scared to be bad at stuff.
Yes,
like
fear of
people are
failure.
actually scared of. They think that they can just pick up a paintbrush and do something amazing, and it's not the reality. You have to work at something for maybe years, maybe
More
months,
than-
maybe
yeah, more than
hours,
years.
whatever it
Yeah.
is. But to actually, you can't just produce something great just out of nowhere.
Yeah. Well, there's a famous quote. I don't know where it's from, but they say that to master something, you need 10,000
Yeah.
hours at doing it. And this is the thing that frustrates me. Is it goes back to that fear of failure. People want to be instant experts. They want to have instant results. They want to show off amazing results for some reason, whether it's vanity or whatever, I don't know. But no one is amazing at something at the beginning. And someone who's got extraordinary skill at something, like say martial arts, karate, they didn't start karate and day one they became a black belt. It was hard work, practice and dedication to it that got them to win that Olympic gold or become a black belt or whatever. And it's the same in the creative arts and field as well. Even someone with a massive natural talent in art and painting, if they've never picked up a paintbrush, they're not going to create an amazing painting first go.
You know, I think the starting point is the biggest point, isn't it? Because if you work, like we've been filming all these painting classes recently, and I was thinking, oh yeah, I could get into that. That, you know, it looks really good and it looks really easy based on what we've seen and stuff. But then it's actually like buying the canvas, buying the paints, buying the paintbrush, and then having a space and making a mess. You know, I
Setting
guess.
the time to do it
Yeah,
as well.
To do it.
exactly.
But then what were you doing instead? Sat there scrolling on TikTok.
But everything, I guess that doesn't help because obviously social media and like TV channels and everything like that, like Netflix, they're all made to keep you addicted and
Yeah.
absorbed. So it's
Yeah.
like, is that some kind of excuse?
But that's kind of the solution, though, isn't
Yeah.
it? If you go step backwards from what you just said there, Ben, and you think, well, the biggest, you work out what's the stumbling blocks, what's stopping me.
Yeah.
If you're seeing stuff on social media and that you're thinking, oh, I wish I could do that. I wish I could create this. I wish I could do a painting. I wish I could take that sort of photograph. Then you need to kind of set yourself a goal, I think, and then think, well, what do I need to do to get to that stage? And regardless of how long it's going to take and what your skill level is at the start, don't let that put you off. The first thing you need to do is to set aside some time for it. Absolutely. And then you need to put some small steps into place to how can I get there? And it might be that you just start with some basic scribbles, like your concepts, your ideas, and you're just thinking through some ideas. It might be that you go and pick up at a secondhand shop, a cheap camera or online and then you start playing around with that. Now, digital cameras, and you don't even need a camera, do you? Because most people have got a phone in their pocket that can take great photos, shoot movies, edit them. So you've got a kind of digital device probably in your pocket that could be at a starting point for your
absolutely.
creativity. And I've seen some amazing photos taken by friends of mine on their social media that have got a real kind of aptitude for light composition and they're just shot on a mobile phone.
Yeah. I mean, it is possible, and I'm glad you brought that up because it's how to overcome these excuses. It's that initial push. It's that initial thing, and I think you've got to have a genuine passion for something. So I think if you've decided, well, I'm going to do art, painting, or video editing, or filming, or photography, you've got to decide, is this, am I really latched onto this? Do I really feel for this?
Is it? Do I just like the idea of doing that, or do I actually like doing it? Because they're two very different things.
They are.
I'd love to be a great painter, but I don't have the inclination to sit there and paint. You know,
so you don't have a full-on passion.
I don't
for
have
it.
a passion for it, but other things you do. Eh?
Yeah, and if you have got a passion for it, then as Tim pointed out, you can work with people, collaborate with people, ask for help. You've just got to be a lot more proactive, not making excuses, and this is excuses for not being creative, not make excuses. Stop wasting time doing whatever else it is. Now, hold on, we're going to get a lot of pushback on this. Oh, well, I've got a family and I've got, to cook the dinner. And yes, we've all got lives. We've all got stuff to do. in my family, it's complete chaos sometimes. You don't find the time to do things, but we also find ourselves sat on the sofa for an awful long time doing not so much.
If you wanted to, you would.
If you really want to, you can find the time instead of spending scrolling on your phone or watching a movie or watching TV or doing whatever. You can dedicate a little bit of time, and it's like I suppose there's a little bit just like discipline of like going to the gym.
It is, isn't it? It's just getting into a bit of a routine, isn't it?
Yeah.
Setting aside a little bit of time each day, each week, or each month to do something that you want to do for yourself.
Yeah. And are we hearing some of the excuses because maybe people tried, didn't get the result they wanted immediately? Because a lot of people these days, I find, want instant success. They don't want to put the work in. Do we get some of the negative responses? Is it from people that have tried something, didn't get the results immediately, so they're going to then start moaning about it? And I think that's possibly partly the problem as well, because any of these creative spheres, to craft a great edit, you don't know how to do it instantly.
And
You've
just
been
all the
doing it
effects
for
and stuff,
over a decade, and you've got to practice it.
Like actually learning the software and stuff, using the effects. Obviously there's like, a narrative, and that can sometimes come naturally or whatever, but actually knowing how to do stuff. There's like, you might find that there's like I remember when I first discovered like what keyframes were, which is just like a basic thing, but it like blew my mind, and I was like, this is amazing. I was like, that's how easy it was. But if if you didn't sit down and actually do it and learn it and have a little look, then you would never know that, and you'd still be like wondering how that was done. But
I think sadly in today's society, and maybe social media is to blame, too many people want to go zero to hero in like a week.
Yeah.
And it's just not possible in anything of, anything that requires a level of skill and knowledge. You can't go zero to hero.
And I think people just think everything's easy.
Yes. Yeah.
Like they just think, oh, it's easy. If they can do it, it's easy, but it's not the reality.
I find a lot of time when I'm painting, and I've spoken to a lot of other artist friends, and they say exactly the same thing. The first part of a painting is really exciting because you just... once you get over the hurdle of putting the first mark on that big white canvas or piece of paper, that's can be quite daunting. Then you're in the exciting moment of just starting the project. You then get into sort of middle stages, often the painting, where you start to doubt yourself, or you've got a vision in your head. And I'm guessing it's probably the same when you're doing a photograph, Carl, when you've got a big project, especially if you've got a big team, a fashion shoot or that, you've got a concept, a vision in your head that you want to bring to reality, and be the same with a movie if you're editing and filming that. So you invest a lot of time and effort to get to that initial starting point, and then that's exciting. Then you get the middle bit where you kind of get a little bit of a slump sometimes, not always.
Yeah.
Sometimes it just happens where you don't even know you're doing it. You're sort of painting on auto, and it's everything just goes perfect. But there's a lot of times where it would be easy just to stop and think, this isn't really going as I envisioned it.
And you have scrapped paintings before?
Sometimes I have scrapped paintings.
I've scrapped
sometimes
photos before.
At that point, I will just stop, put the painting down. Quite often I'll leave the canvas and leave it facing the wall so I don't look at it. Because I just come back and look at it with a pair of fresh eyes 2 days later, and straight away I spot what's not working. Just for that fresh eyes, because you get out of that kind of where you start over worrying and overthinking it all. So, and then you get to the stage where you're then in the final stretch of the painting, and that's the really fun bit, and you're just adding those extra little flicks of light, and the whole thing comes to life, and your vision has then
But
come
it's
into reality.
a good point, though, that even for experienced long-term professionals, it doesn't go perfectly every time.
And I suppose it's having the maturity and that skill to know that it's not a linear process, that it's not just going to go like this, that you're going to have moments of inspiration, moments where you don't want to do it for months and up and down.
Yeah.
What's
what
the
I always say
phrase?
to people when I'm teaching them is it's like a process. So, and there's stages that you go through with your painting, and whatever style you're doing. Like I've got an artist friend that's an amazing oil painter, but he does some amazing pictures that he sells just using a big biro.
Yeah.
So you don't need amazing tools, and his work that he does with the biro looks absolutely phenomenal. It's amazing.
I saw a guy on social media painting, I don't know what the base material was, but his actual, the stuff he was using was was a Bunsen burner or fire. He was painting with fire, but it looked like charcoal, amazing detail. And I've never seen anything like it. And literally he was creating these really detailed by using small little jet burner things that were burning the base material. It was incredible.
Because in reality, all you're trying to do as a sort of creative, aren't you, is you're creating something visual that you're going to enjoy making, crafting and looking at, and possibly be happy enough and proud enough of to show to other people afterwards.
The phrase I was thinking of is failure is the most effective teacher. And this is absolutely true. And this is what people, I believe, are missing an understanding of, because they want zero to hero instantly, is it's actually failing and realizing, oh, that didn't work, or doing it that way didn't work, that teaches you to try it doing it the other way. You have to fail over and over and over again. You have to mess it up over and over again. You have to have bad results for you to get any better.
Only by doing that will you try new things, will you experiment, will you adapt.
Yeah.
And then when you go to do it, you already know to go for that second option because you've learned that the first one didn't work.
Immediately. You know, sometimes a client will be in on a shoot and they'll say, oh, well, you know, what if you do that? I say, no, you don't want to do that, because that is definitely not going to work, because you know that just from experience. So
getting it wrong that first time.
Yeah. And I think this is maybe part of the problem, generational problem, is that some people expect instant success, instant, expertise. And it just doesn't work like that.
And also instant gratification from a skill. People think that it's that final product that is the thing that gives you the result, like amazing result.
Maybe a rush to get there rather than enjoying the process of doing it.
I mean, I think that's the key thing, isn't it? Enjoying the process and using that to benefit you and your own personal development. Do you know what I mean? And investing some time in yourself.
Absolutely.
And I think people need that in life.
Like,
I think people are so, especially like we were talking in a previous podcast about social media and people just scrolling through TikTok, and it's so quick and it's so, I think you need things to slow you down in life, whether that be spending 4 hours on a painting and slowly doing it or photographing nature or whatever it might be. You need something to slow you down.
When you're learning, like, these skills as well, you definitely have those little moments where you learn something and you're like, yes, so good. You have those like kind of aha bits and you're like, that's, that's how I do it, or that's why I do it. Or, and there's like that, even though it's not like, you still like might not be amazing at guitar or whatever, but you learn that one technique and then you're like, that's so good.
But also that's why it's so important to document, whether that's outwardly on socials or to yourself, how you're progressing. Like if you look at things that you created a year ago, 2 years ago, 2 weeks ago, and then look at what you've got now, it's so easy to be like, oh, I'm still not happy with everything that I'm doing. But when you look back at how your work was to how it is now, you get that gratification of, oh, I've actually advanced. But it's quite hard to see that when you've got your blinkers on where you are at that point.
But I think the long realizing that being good at something in the creative world isn't necessarily natural talent or instant natural flair. It can take a long time. People do a university degree, which might take 4 years, and some people choose to do the same degree as an open university, doing it from home, and it'll take 6 years. But they find the time to do it in between their normal lives, and they end up with the degree they wanted. And learning a particular art form, sculpting, painting, filmmaking, whatever, it's going to take the time, and you have to expect to have to put the effort and the time in. You have to expect to have some failures and some successes, and don't consider that you have to have the very best gear and kit and everything to be able to do something amazing, because you don't.
Do you think adding the element of additional people also can kind of put you back a bit as well? Because like, say if you really wanted to be a portrait photographer or a fashion photographer, you've got to get quite a lot of people involved. And then, well, fashion particularly, if it was portrait, maybe not so much if you're just doing natural light, but even still, if you were doing natural light portrait and you like collaborated with this model that you found on Instagram who was up and coming, and obviously you hadn't shot anything at this point, and then they asked for the final photos back and then yours were terrible. There must be that element of worry.
There is, I guess, but then you practice on your sister or your brother or your family first, or your cat, and you don't go out and there's options, isn't there? Everyone's got to start somewhere. Street photography is a great one, isn't it?
Yeah.
People will pick up a camera and they just go out and take pictures on the street. And I think one of the biggest inhibitors with that is people's fear of, it's almost like an embarrassment of like, I'm having to take pictures of strangers on the street, or some people do it a little bit more sort of covertly, like people at a distance and shadows and reflections off of buildings and things. And then they develop into these incredible photographers at these street scenes that they then learn some of the craft and learn some of the understanding, and then they might diverse into another area, like you say, portrait photography, but they can do it with a bit more confidence, a bit more knowledge.
They know how to control the aperture and the shutter because they did that in the street.
Exactly. They understand a bit more about light and lighting and lenses and angles and things. So you've got to start somewhere. You've got to give it a go, and you've got to get over that initial latency and inertia thing.
I think once you get going, there's definitely like that ball rolling effect, like because you're like, oh, all right, I messed that up. I'm keen to get out and do that again and change that and do it like this time. Whichever genre you're of creative arts you're working in.
So latency and inertia is one area we're looking at excuses for not being creative and how to overcome it. Forgetting about fear of failure and using failure as a learning tool.
Yeah.
Really effective learning tool. So these are ways we can overcome it. And as Tim mentioned earlier, is collaboration, finding friends, people that are willing to help you out. You must have a few friends that, can pose for you in a painting or come and hold a reflector for you or do something, but it's just making the effort to reach out and do it. Any other excuses we hear for not being creative?
I don't know.
I mean, for me, it's mostly equipment, software, or one of the other classics. It doesn't come up so much now, but one of the other classics used to be, oh, well, it only looks so good because you use Photoshop. Well, maybe so, but it took a lot of training to learn how to use that Photoshop in that way and learn burning and dodging and coloration techniques to get that result. And guess what? You can get Photoshop for $10 a month and you can learn too, my little friend. It's just,
I guess if you look at Eric Johansson's work, that's all Photoshop.
Exactly.
And that's like incredible.
Why it's so great.
Yeah. And it's incredible creative post-production work. I mean, it's not all Photoshop because he's obviously taking the components, the photographs, the components and lighting it, but he's putting together these montages that are amazing. And, Eric's just his ideas, the creative concepts themselves, that narrative he's telling through it, but he's renowned as a Photoshop artist, creator, combined with photography. And, I suppose this can cross into art as well. You can create art in electronic digital form.
We can, yeah.
You can paint on an iPad.
On an iPad, and on a phone as well. Like any way can be.
Yeah. So if you don't like the mess,
that's it.
Yeah.
So that's what I was going to say is one of the big excuses I think with people getting into art is they don't have the space. And yes, doing a large oil painting on canvas can be messy. It can be smelly. It's more messy if you're messy. It can be a very clean medium.
Well, based on your desk and your office, I reckon your studio's pretty messy.
I've been there.
So, but if you pick a medium that is easier and you don't have much space, just a small watercolor pad or something, or a sketch pad, doesn't really need any space. You can just get it out on the kitchen table, and kitchen worktop. You
could literally just have 2 or 3 different grade pencils and a pad and just sketch, couldn't you?
Just have a pen and a sketch pad.
Yeah, some people make incredible creations with biros, don't they?
Yes, that's it.
And so there's no mess apart from maybe a little bit of ink you get on your hand.
No, so that's it. And a lot of the stuff I do as well is I really enjoy painting outdoors. So you don't need a studio space or even a corner of the house. I just have some equipment in a rucksack that's kind of ready to go if I've got any, and a few hours of an evening and it looks nice conditions, sort of conditions I like to be out painting in. I can just go out and do some painting.
Yeah, and you can film high level productions, as we've done for the BBC, on affordable equipment and edit it on a laptop.
Yeah.
When it, that's really what it comes down to. I mean, yes, we have to use lighting here and there, but a lot of it is natural light. So there's always
and also we often getting the odd clips for even high production stuff on a phone camera or a GoPro, like sort of relatively inexpensive equipment, that stands up quite okay to stuff that's been shot on high equipment.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah.
All right. So there we have it, folks. Excuses for not being creative. We've wiped them out. We're not accepting them. Love to hear your comments. I'm sure there's going to be plenty. We're not accepting the excuses, I'm afraid, because whether it's equipment or whatever it is, this is really not the stopping point. There's always a way, even with like the mess of art, like we said. You could sketch, you could biro, you could do video editing and filming on lower budget equipment than ever before. You can do photography on more. I mean, yes, there's always an initial cost. There's always an initial cost in anything. If you're into motorcycling, you've got to have a motorbike. If you're into knitting, you're going to have to buy the materials. Some hobbies are more expensive than others. Absolutely. No way around that, I'm afraid. But it doesn't mean to say that the base equipment should stop you getting started, and it certainly won't stop you creating good stuff.
Don't have to
It's
have
only
everything
yourself
straight
stopping.
away.
Yeah, absolutely. I do firmly believe that it's only yourself, and often, I hate to say it, it does come down to laziness and people's their willingness to learn stuff. Is there an unwillingness to learn? I don't know. People's
Neglect.
Neglect. Yeah, I don't know. It's just that they some people, I find, don't feel that they shouldn't have to put that amount of effort in, and that unfortunately we're never going to overcome. That if you're of that mindset, then I'm afraid you're kind of probably doomed for failure, because if you're not willing to put the effort in, how are you going to do anything?
That's it. You need to just set aside some time, don't you, and go and give it a go.
And hopefully enjoy it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you wouldn't. Otherwise, you're never going to get
No.
really anywhere.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
If you
It's
hate
a
it.
skill at the end of the day, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, because you're not going to be getting paid in
anything.
the early days you're not going to be making money from this skill.
Yeah.
Unless you've got to enjoy it really.
Yeah. No kung fu master became a kung fu master on the first day.
No.
It was effort, skill,
Exactly.
time, and investment in it. Right. Okay. I'm glad we covered that one. Excuses for not being creative. I think we've exhausted that. Thanks for listening or watching, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time.
See you next time.
This was the Learn, Create, Thrive podcast, hosted by visualeducation.com.